Hey, y'all, we're a day late and dollar short. Yeah, I'll say it. We're Almost Agreement at gmail.com, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. It's my birthday, and so for my birthday, I went and got my ass kicked by the University of Tennessee Alumni Marching Band and had a great time. And for that reason, I didn't want to stay up drinking all night last night so I could go to bed and get up at 5 this morning to go to rehearsal and do all that kind of stuff. So anyway, we'll talk more about my fun band experience today. I had a great time. I enjoyed seeing the band. I enjoyed UT whooping some ass on UConn. And yeah, it's just an overall fun day. And now I get to sit down in my comfy chair and have a couple drinks and hang out with my boy Sam. So can't get any better than that. So we're Almost Agreement at gmail.com. Find us on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube. Go to the website, almostagreement.com. While you're there, check out all the stuff we got going on. Favorite podcast provider, all those kind of things. Tell your friends about us, all that kind of stuff. We're going to keep doing what we're doing, and we're going to start the show. Here we go. Oh, that is so delicious. Yeah, so band stuff was a good time. It was weird. Probably the weirdest thing, like, when I was a student, there was no alcohol on campus at all, period. End of story. And so we do the march to the stadium, and we get to our seats. You know, we don't, as the alumni band, we don't have any requirement. Like, the band has to be in their seats. Actually, they don't anymore, apparently. At least when I was there, like, as soon as you get in the stadium, you run pregame, and you go up in the stands, you play stand tunes until halftime. Like, that was the thing. We got the third quarter off, and that's when we could go to concessions, get something to eat, just walk around, stretch our legs, do whatever. But then we had to be back for the fourth quarter, play the alma mater and the Tennessee Waltz, and then that's when we were dismissed and gone. That's how we did it when I was in band.
Right.
And so, like, we got there, we got in the stands, and it's like, oh, let's go wander around. So we go wander around, check some shit out, come sit back down, and then, like, a couple of other drummers next to me coming back with a couple beers. And, like it's a double, like, it's a 2-level thing. It's like, you're in uniform, you can't have a beer. And we're in the stadium, you can't have a beer. And pretty much they just don't care. Like, the band at large doesn't really care, because really all they're doing, I mean, it's a fundraising event for them. They're just trying to get more new regular donors. Like, that's most of what Alumni Band is.
Remember how fun this was?
They have a whole patch.
You got any extra money?
Yeah. Yeah, they have this whole patch system for donors. Like, so, like, you know, the uniform we were required to buy. And so I was kind of bitching about it to a friend of mine who I also marched in the band. And I was telling him about it. And I was like, it's like $500 for me and the missus to do Alumni Band. And her response was, fucking seriously? I was like, well, yeah, but it's kind of, you know, we had to buy our uniform parts, you know, and that was about half of it. And so, like, next year, I think registration was like $75-$80. And so, like, next year, it'd just be like $120, $150 for the two of us to do it.
Right.
And it won't be as big a deal. And now we've got one under our belt, so we understand it better. But fuck the University of Tennessee and SEC and whatever conference UConn plays in for making this a noon game. Like, I had to be in the band room at 6 a.m. to get my drum.
Yeah. And
then we did a 7 o'clock. We did a music rehearsal. 7:45, we were on the field with the regular band, which is crazy. I mean, it's fucking crazy what UT does. It really is. Like, most alumni bands, you just kind of walk you out on the field, you play some tunes, and you walk off. Like, we actually did a very small, very simple circle drill show with them, but we did actually march, do marching things, get on the field, play some stuff, get off the field, and, you know, survive. And so anyway, my back's in knots. I'm not a kid anymore. I can't run around with a drum on my back like it's no big deal.
Couldn't be like, hey, somebody want to trade with me?
Oh, I'm marching cymbals next year.
No.
No doubt. Just because it's stressful. Marching bass drum is stressful. You can't see shit. And, like, it's a new parade route now because all the different construction and stuff going on in there. So, like, the pedestrian bridge that goes over right in front of Ayers, like, it used to be the student center. It used to be a small bridge. And now it's like it could hold traffic if it wanted to, but it doesn't.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
But on either end of that bridge, they've got those steel pillars that come out so that traffic can't go on it.
Right.
And so, like, it was one of those that the snare drummer in front of me goes, Just like turns around and looks at me and is pointing at the steel post to give me the heads up to dodge the motherfucker.
It's right here.
Yeah, and so that was stressful. And like any parade, one of the things in any parade, same thing with the Christmas parade at Rocky Hill, is the longer the parade goes on, the more people kind of squeeze in as far as spectators. And so, like at the beginning of the parade, the escort and whoever, they've got everybody on the sidewalks, off the street. But you get down near the stadium, there's people sitting on the curb with their feet out. And we're 8 wide bass drums. And I'm on the outside trying not to hit a 6-year-old that's sitting on her dad's lap on the curb.
Should have kicked one.
I know, I was thinking about it. Well, there's a couple times where I was playing the groove and I was kind of like, oh shit, I need to let me bring this right hand in a little bit before I thunk somebody in the face. Yeah. Anyway, it was a great time. Love the band. Band is the best thing that ever happened to me. I've said that thing 10,000 times. I was talking to my mother-in-law about it yesterday. I was like, the 2 most important people in my life I met in band.
Right.
I met you in band in high school, and I met the missus in band at UT. They're the 2 most important adult people, I guess. My kids, I'm not counting my kids, and they're not real people anyway.
It's true.
So, yeah, I am fucking exhausted. That's the other, I am fucking beat. It was rough. It was nice. It was a nice day. It was cold this morning. We warmed up, and then it got to be fucking hot, and we're in all black.
No damn.
And it got hot, and the sun was out, and it was strong, and so anyway, it was a great time. Anyway, what's going on in the world of local politics? Anything on your?
Not on my radar.
Not on your radar. There was some stuff that I had seen and or read about in the not so distant past that was going on this week. Early voting finished. Oh, I did follow up with Chris Davis as on our discussion last week. I'll get into that in a second. Early voting did finish. The turnout is abysmal. Surprise. And so, let's see here. Let me find this Chris Davis email so I can quote him, because part of the email was him kind of getting on me for misquoting him. And fair enough.
It's true.
Yeah, so I emailed him. I said, so we were chatting on the air this week. I have a question for you. Let's say the primary this year, but how much would you say the election spent per vote on this year's primary? His response, quote, Chris Davis, quote, I don't keep that type of information in my head. Let me give you examples from 2021, and you can do the math. For 2 combined elections in 2021, meaning the primary and the general in 2021, there were a total of right under 32,000 votes cast. Ultimately, those 2 elections, with a combined total of 32,000-ish votes, cost the taxpayers of the city of Knoxville a total of $415,000. That comes out to a ballpark of $13 to $14 a vote. So there's a couple things. There's a couple clarifiers that Chris goes on to explain to me, and then I've learned some other things in the process of it. One, the state of Tennessee, by law, the election commission has to be prepared for a 100% voter turnout in every election cycle. Huh. So every registered voter, which is like 105 or something like that, 1,000 in the city of Knoxville, every registered voter has to be, or the election commission has to be prepared to handle all 105,000 voters. And so it's going to cost a goodly sum for that reason. Right. Now, that being said, all 100 and whatever show up. In both elections, you're looking at 200,000 votes cast at $415,000 because it's not going to cost a lot more than it did.
Should.
So you're looking at $2 a vote, which is still a little bit more than I expected doing the math. Personally, I expected it to be like if 100% turnout happened, I expected it to be a little bit cheaper than that, but potato. But then also the city of Knoxville pays for it. So myself, yourself as county residents, not city residents. I mean, I don't know. Like where it comes out of the city coffers, whether it's out of the property tax portion or the sales tax portion, is debatable because you and I certainly pay city sales tax in Marat. I don't know exactly how, but long story short, ballpark, the city pays for it, which I guess which kind of makes it a little bit more upsetting too. But going back, let me back up a second. That's the math that Chris said at 32,000 votes is for both a primary and a general. I would assume, and I would assume Chris would agree with me on this, that I would assume of those divide that by 2. That's really the number of voters, because most of the people voted in the primary. And maybe it's probably like a 60-40 or maybe a 30-70 split where, 6,000, 7,000 voted in the primary and 18,000 voted in the general or something like that.
Yeah.
So realistically, that's not like that's funky math that he gave me too. I get what he was trying to do, and I don't think he was trying to be deceitful about it. It's just that's the only way he could think of to count it, and I get it. But realistically, it's more than that. I mean, again, just for the sake of math, of doing the math, if everybody who voted in the primary turned around and voted in the general, that would be 16,000 total voters. So it would then be $25 to $30 a voter, which is a goodly sum. But anyway, the point is that it's not a metric, and I made clear in responding to him that it's like, this wasn't me trying to pick on you guys or make any issue out of you guys. It was really just a way to illustrate how terrible these turnouts are. Because really, like this one, we got Tuesday, the actual election day is coming up on Tuesday, but it's going to be less than the primary. Like, very likely significantly less than the primary. So that little math equation we did is actually backwards for how this election is going to come out. Because more people voted in the primary than will vote in the general. Probably. I can't say that because it hasn't happened, but
Think so?
Yeah, pretty sure. Because the way they do it, it's stupid. The mayor's ballot, the mayor wins. If the mayor wins a outright majority of the voters in the primary, there is no general. And the mayor's the biggest name on the ballot. If that race isn't on the ballot, people don't show up. It's kind of that simple. But yeah, again, and so in the financing of it, the other part I learned is that the state or the local parties or the two combined, they actually pay the election commission for a primary that doesn't involve any other elections. They actually chip in a portion of a primary if that primary is with other stuff. So I don't know exactly what a county-wide election would cost. I'd say it's a little bit more than that, probably $500,000, $550,000. But the parties will pay $150,000, $200,000 of that because the primary part they have to pay for if they want to do a primary. Because technically I don't know exactly how it works. Like at least with the school board one this last time around, since it was the first time it was partisan, it doesn't have to be a partisan race. But if the parties want to hold a partisan primary, they have to request it from the election commission. And if it's legal for this, if basically the state says if it's legal, you have to grant that request. And so the parties requested it. And now the school board, I guess they'd still get the R&D, but it wouldn't be a diminished number of voters or a number of candidates. So if 3 Republicans were running for school board seat 7 and no Democrat, and the Republicans didn't want to pay for a primary, then you just have 3 names on the general that all have R's after them, I think.
Okay.
I would have to double check on that one. But to set the record straight with Chris on the real part of it is Chris stated that he has never stated using the word volunteers in reference to his election workers. I believe him on that. Chris is pretty choice with his words. He's pretty good about making sure he says things correctly. But the gist of what I was getting at was accurate. He agrees with me there. The general colloquial term that people use for election workers is election volunteers.
Right.
People call them volunteers. And he said that there's a few times where he corrects people on it in real time. Like if a news organization is talking to him, like, how many volunteers did you have over this time? It's like, well, we had this many election workers. Right. He doesn't say they're not volunteers to him, but he corrects. He responds to it with the correction of, I had this many workers. But that's apparently that kind of struck a nerve with him because that's one of his things. I mean, because that is one of his things. I do recall after he kind of brought it up that when we talked about it, he did mention that it's kind of a pet peeve of his because that's one of the things that he's trying to work out of because he agrees with me that if people understand that it's a paying gig, he probably would get some more workers.
Right.
It'd be easier for him to fill his election worker need if the general public knows that it's a paying gig. So, Chris Davis, thank you for the info. You're the best. I hope you have a wonderful and smooth Tuesday and it doesn't go too bad. I also did learn that in whatever voting machines that we use here in Knoxville with the paper backup system. Mm-hmm. So those of you who have voted recently, you get a paper ballot, you fill in the squares, you run it through the machine, It keeps the paper ballot in a box. That machine is not online, not connected to the internet. There's a card in that machine, and that when the poll closes, that card gets taken to the Election Commission office, loaded onto a computer in the Election Commission office that is not online, where it aggregates the totals from all the cards from all the machines. So like Rocky Hill over here, we usually have like 2 machines. So each machine has its own card. Those go down to the Election Commission's office. They get loaded into the machine. Every other precinct, they come down, they get loaded into the machine, and that's how the official results come out. Once those all get onto that machine, then they get loaded onto a different card and taken to a computer with the internet on it where they can put it on the website. But the whole process is offline intentionally, which I think is pretty smart.
One extra layer of safety.
Yeah. Like, so, I mean, the idea of it being at least remotely hacked is impossible.
Yeah.
Like, maybe if you put A, B, C, 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 A, B, C, B, C, that it might freak the computer out and do something weird if you understand how the coding works or something like that. But that's about it. This ambulance contract thing is just never going to end, apparently.
Thought it was over.
Not officially. And so at this most recent meeting or whatever, there's a bunch of discussion about, like, why are we giving this contract? Like, I guess it wasn't actually over. It was the official recommendation from the consultant came at the last meeting. So, and like any county commission meeting is a double vote. They vote on it in one meeting, and then it has to be voted on again in the next.
Right.
And so I don't know where we are in this in the process as far as the system being, whether this was the second vote on it. I think this was the first official vote on it. I don't know. But there's a lot of questions about, it's like, well, we had some serious problem with you guys. Why are we giving this to you guys again? Like, why are we going this way when this is one we had? But then it's also like, well, we're on an interim contract with them in the first place that runs out in January, and I don't know if there's enough time
Team search for another one.
for them to search for another one, select another one, and have that other one up and ready to take over by mid-late January, whenever the official contract date ends. Because if you're AMR or whatever, it's like, our contract's out, deuces.
Yeah. Have fun.
And you don't have, and the one you selected isn't ready. What are you going to, like, we're fucked. We're already kind of fucked, but we're double fucked. So I think it's more just kind of posturing for a couple of specific, like, issues that different people want poked at, that it's still just going to go through as more or less as is, just some minor adjustments or something like that. Yeah, early voting still sucks. It's already said that. But early voting finished a couple days ago. I guess Thursday was the last day of early voting. Let's see here. A different email from Chris Davis. This is just a general one that everybody got. Oh, that's meeting notes. The end of early voting. And in comparison, I love that he does that. I appreciate that so much. There, at the end of early voting, there are 6,474 early voting ballots cast. To do the comparison, it would be the 2019 election and the same with all the same things on the ballot. There were 10,878, but the mayor was on that ballot because they didn't win the primary outright. Going back again to November 2015, early voting totals 1,606. So we beat the shit out of 2015. And so, like, I mean, the mayor being on the ballot or not is the hugest number difference. And so I guess, historically speaking, if you go every other one here, because it looks like in the true comparables where the mayor wasn't on the general, you have a 6474, a 1606, and a 1593. So we were significantly up in early voting by comparable. Pathetic, it's 64,000 or 6,400. but up.
Yeah.
So I guess we could be pleased. District 2 by a mile and a half. And that includes absentee ballots. District 2 had the most voters, about a third of the total. District 4 had just short of that. And so then districts 1, 3, 5, and 6 combined for just over a third. So, and I was asking Scott and Jesse about that. I was like, all right, so the tea leaves on that, like, does that say something? Like District 2 is a fairly affluent West Knox district. Are they more likely to be a Tim Hill voter, or are they more likely to be Amelia Parker voter in that race? And it's kind of like, it's a tough one, especially with that combination, because, the Sequoia Hills crowd tends to be a little bit left-leaning, but Amelia ain't really in the normal left-leaning category. But everybody apparently hates developers.
I mean, there's a decent bit of GOP in Sequoia Hills as well.
I would think so too. It's where the money's at. That's that's at least the assumption is where the money is where the red votes are. And so I don't know. I guess me and not having a good history of looking at this, like not actually paying attention to this in the past history, not as in I haven't been historically wrong because I don't know I haven't talked about it before. But my guess at it, with my lack of historical knowledge of it, is, to me, I think it would tend to lean in Tim Hill's favor on that particular race.
Yeah.
As well as our Bentley Marlowe, Debbie Helsley race. I mean, to me, I would think that leans right a little bit, because District 4 is northwest. So that's getting over towards Hardin Valley and all that kind of stuff. Same kind of general demographics: white, middle to upper middle class families, pretty good income, kids in the school system, that kind of stuff. I would think that tends to imply right. But Amelia Parker won last time around.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Debbie Helsley didn't. This would be her first actual elected office, as far as an actual governmental office. She's been elected to party officership, but not to public office. And then the judge race, which I have no idea how to guess it. I mean, it got pretty fucking hot, though. Like, it's crazy. Like, there's a lot of conversation about how hot and gross it's like. Everybody's like Brian Hornback and his page, and Hornback has no qualms about showing his preferences in his reporting. That's just the way he does his thing. I'm not good. You have to take his reporting knowing that, and he does good reporting. Like, he breaks some real news every once in a while, but he is a very partisan person. He is a member of the state executive committee for the Republican District 6. Like, if I were actually a Republican, he would be my local representative of the state party.
Yeah.
Like, he was elected to that office on the ballot last year. And so he runs his e-paper blog. I don't know what to technically call it. I mean, he is very partisan and doesn't pretend like he isn't, which I appreciate. He's not trying to, he's not lying. But he certainly picks and chooses what he talks about and how he talks about it to get the best light on it. And so anyway, he's a Rawson guy. And so, like, anyway, to be fair, partisanship or not, he made points of, like, like everybody's been poking at Rawson because he did that Trump rally thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, here's 10,000 other things. And I guess Hornback pulled his voting and donation records over the last 20, 30 years. And it's like, here's a donation to a Democratic candidate. Here's a donation to a Republican candidate. Here's a donation to a Democratic candidate. Here's a donation to a Democratic Party. Like, it's just like, Rawson's just a politics guy. He likes being in it, is what it seems like. I don't know. Again, it's a judge race. I don't care. I don't know what it means. It doesn't, I don't know what the difference is in the two of them. Like, Cavanis is young and not Rawson. That's the pros on the Cavanis side to me. And I guess inversely, Rawson is old, which I guess you could call it a plus in the sense that it's an experience thing, or you could call it a negative. He's been in the job for 30-something years. It's maybe time for somebody else.
Didn't, the Bar Association come out with the statement on it?
Yeah, I don't remember who they asked for. I think I think they lean towards Rawson because A lot of people don't know Cavanis. He hasn't practiced a lot locally. At least
No, I
not in
mean on
courts.
the reports on him going to the rally or whatever.
Oh, I don't know. Please enlighten me. I don't know if I heard about that.
Oh, I thought you'd mentioned it something before.
I know the Bar Association does their, like, here's our, like, they do a survey of lawyers, and the lawyers pick, but, like, the inference I got from talking to people about it is it's more like it's a who you know game, which is part of the lawyer's game anyway. And a lot of people know Rawson. A lot of people have been before Rawson, where not a lot of people have been or know Cavanis or have worked a case with or against him. So they don't. He's just not. He doesn't have the years of trials and shit. But it's also Rawson, which a lot of the lawyers don't. I mean, not a lot of lawyers go into fucking municipal code violation court hearings because you got a speeding ticket or some do. Some people bring. I've been in court a couple times for that kind of shit and watch people bring their lawyers with them.
Yeah,
but it's not like every other case the lawyer is there. Maybe even has to be there.
Yeah, I think they've got somebody there. That was like, a couple times I went in. There was somebody that pretty much like represents everyone that's up there for that day.
So if I'm gonna have to pick, if I like I say all this about like what the early cast says by district, but I think I'm gonna pick Amelia. I think I'm gonna pick Debbie. I think both of them win. I think if either of them lose, it'll be Amelia to Tim. I don't think Marlowe's going to make it. I think Marlowe's history of his vocalization of his issues with the homeless population or the unhoused or whatever we're calling them, I think that's too much for city voters to bear. Like he said some terrible shit publicly on his Facebook page and shit like that.
Nice.
And I don't like that's you can't walk those like some of the stuff he said. I don't think you could ever walk back. Like you can't really be like well that was 10 years ago. I've grown. I've changed. And it's like you were talking about putting them down like dogs, man. That's you're
damn.
You were equating them to stray animals, and that's just you don't get to back that one off. But we'll see. That would be my guess. Lynn Fugate's going to win. I'll go ahead and pick that one right now, and I'll pick that Charles, whatever his name is, in District 5, he's going to win. And I'm gonna pick Cavanis. I think Cavanis is going to pull it out, and we're going to get a new
general judge,
new city municipal judge. I think for the handful of people that bothered to vote, all 6,000 of them or so. And then another 4,000 or 5,000 on Tuesday. For all of them that bother voting, either they'll skip it, or I don't know. I'm just thinking that's a new name. Because I would guess that a lot of these city voters are very like of the at least of the 5 or so thousand that bother voting in every I feel like they're all the same people over and over again. And so I guess that's the moral of the story. And they're all old people, too. So maybe that actually leads towards Rawson now that I say that.
That's true.
80% is 35 plus. 60% is 55 plus.
Yeah.
So, like, less than 20%, which, 20% is 6,500 is 1,100. There's 1,100 18 to 35-year-olds in the city of Knoxville that have voted early. That's pretty sad. But I would have been one of them when I was a city resident. I don't even think I was registered to vote when I was a city resident. I was registered, but I was not registered at my residence. I was registered probably still at my parents' house.
Yeah.
And I don't think I voted often when I was. I'm trying to think of where I voted physically. I voted Rocky Hill now. I don't know. I'm going to have to think about that. I don't think I ever voted when I lived in the Fellini neighborhood. In the Little Pig House.
Yeah. I did.
I would assume Belmorris would have been the voting location.
Is that a location?
I don't know if it is or not. But that would be my guess for that neighborhood. I was thinking about it too. Why don't we just use the post office?
Most of them don't have that big of a lobby. The main one does there on Weisgarber. But
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's fair.
yeah, a couple of them, like their parking lot's not very big.
Yeah, that's true. That's I rescind my. I don't know. I mean, you're going to get. I think voting precincts are smaller than zip codes anyway. They're significantly smaller than zip codes. But early voting, bridge to nowhere. Campus stuff. I don't. That was about it. That was the majority of the top line news that I remember from this week. At this moment in time. Oh, that's what it was. Apparently, the State Board of Education has hired a new system head, whatever they call him. The state's version of a superintendent.
Okay.
Who apparently his only job is to legitimately destroy public schools.
How so?
So apparently, they're wanting to institute a letter grade for schools. So schools get just A through F letter grades for their performance. Now, in similar versions of this that the state has done in the past, the majority of that grading system, now they haven't done the letter grade version per se, but the majority of that system, when they look at schools, they look at growth in performance, not just performance numbers. So if your school has third graders that 60% of your third graders are reading at or above third grade level, and that is a C, well, if 60 to 70 is a C, the old formula, if over a year's time you jump to like 67%, that 11-12% jump is what they look at more than, or that 6-7% jump is what they look at more than the true number.
Okay.
So if the 2022 third graders get 60%, the 2023 graders get 65%, that 5% jump is a good number. They like that. Whereas the new system says, well, you're still in the 60s, that's still a D.
Mm-hmm.
We don't care where you were to where you are. That's still a D.
Right. You made improvement. Good job, but you're still...
Right. And I kind of get the logic of it in some sense. It's like, okay, well, you're sucking less, but you still suck.
Right.
And I don't disagree with that as a reasonable way to look at things. But when the reality is, and so and all the times I've talked to McPherson, and the couple of times I talked to McPherson from the school board's finance side, the reality is the economics of the neighborhood has more to do with the success rate of the students in the school than any amount of dollars that the state or local government puts into the school. Like, realistically, all these letter grades are going to do is show, it's going to be a different way to show how poor a neighborhood is.
Yeah.
And so the Farragut schools and stuff like that are affluent neighborhoods are going to get the A's, and the Lonsdale and the Belmorrises are going to get F's. And it's just, that's like, you could do that without changing some formulaic system. You just say, hey, what's the average income of the parents at the school? If it's less than X, they're going to fail. It's just the reality. And so this new grading system is really like what it sounds like, at least, is the intent is to take poor families and tell them their school sucks. Here's a voucher, send them to a private school. And so it's a way, so it doesn't matter how good the private school is or not. It's just a way to get.
It's a way to drive more people to a charter.
Right, because you got to think, though. So if your school is what we're talking about, it's getting an A. So if we're talking about a Farragut Elementary School or whatever it's called, who is likely to get an A in this grading system, if you're a parent and you feel good about what the school is doing and the what the public school is doing, you feel good about your student, you feel good about all that kind of stuff, even though you could afford private school, especially with a voucher, you're not as likely to pull your kids out because you feel good about the public school that you're in. My school is a good school. Why would I take my kids out? You want families that are disappointed or upset with their school, especially when the state is telling you that it's a crappy school because they get Fs every year. And so a way to, even though it's a way to help higher income families pay less for private schooling, it's really the best way to sell the totality of the program is to get the poor families in. And then especially if you get into religious schools and stuff like that, they don't have to follow the state requirements and all that kind of stuff. And then we get into immeasurable, like it's just immeasurable what, blah, 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 Christian Academy is doing as compared to Farragut High School. Like we don't have a way to measure them against each other because they don't teach the same stuff anymore.
Right.
Which I don't know. This is one of my issues. Like I go back and forth. It's like, I'm not necessarily a big fan of faith-based schooling, but I don't know that I'm certainly not a fan of the way the public schools are going. So, I don't know, 6 or half dozen, I guess, to me. I'm interested to see some of it as it comes out.
Do we have a lot of public schools that are struggling in the county?
I think we do. Yeah. We have 60-something schools total. I think like 30 are C or lower in this grading scale, or will be C or lower once the grades come out. So, I don't know. Hopefully before any of all these crazy things adjust, my kids will be out of school and I don't have to worry about it. But I don't know. Like it's one of those things. Like I get real stuck in like a doom loop in my own head when I start thinking about this kind of stuff, because it's like, okay, so there's a podcast. It's called the Puberty Podcast. It's these two ladies who talk about, how as adults to help your kids go through puberty, how to talk to your kids about puberty issues, sex and sexualization, all the different stuff that, are always the weird birds and the bees conversation, the shit that, parents get uncomfortable, kids get uncomfortable when their parents talk to them about them kind of stuff.
Right.
And the whole point of the podcast is to do this stuff. These ladies wrote a book on it. It's a pretty good book. Apparently I haven't read the book, but, and so the missus will send me some episodes, especially when it's about dicks and stuff like that. Cause she doesn't want to, she's pretty much said, you're having the conversation with them about, taking care of their own dicks. It's like, okay, that's fair. I acknowledge that. And so, the first episode she sent me was called The P Word. And so it's like, it's actually not very helpful. Like basically they were talking to a guy who wrote a book about dicks in a lot of different mammals. And so he's just talking about how the organ works and stuff like that, but using a bunch of different mammals to try to make it a little less uncomfortable to talk about penis on stuff. So anyway, this most recent episode was talking about sex ed, and this is one of those things that like there's this automatic assumption that since there's not a federal standard for it, that's a bad thing. And while I'm probably more liberal on if we're going to teach kids things, I think sex ed's not a bad thing to teach kids. I'm good with it. I'm not going to be the parent that says, no, he's staying home that day, or he's going to go to gym class instead of go to the sex ed class, which I don't even know if they do here at all.
No, I'm not sure.
But, I'm more liberal about it. I'm perfectly okay with, some level of conversation coming out of the school to put them in a position to have to address and consider some of the issues that come along with sex, sexuality, and relationships, and as a teenager. I mean, that's just I'm perfectly okay with more than it being more than me to have that conversation with them. And so I lean on the side of a more complete sexual education for kids. Like I'm okay with it, but I don't know that I want a federal standard for it either. And so like half of the episode is them talking about, well, like California and Tennessee and Texas and all these different states have completely different laws on it. So depending on which state you're in, some of the stuff that we're talking about is going to apply, some of it's not. And so there's a whole bunch of conversation in the episode about how it's a problem to them that the Federal Board of Education doesn't have a standard mandate to all schools across the country. And it's like, I understand the premise of why you care about that. But for me, the philosophical issues I have with that are greater. I don't want the federal government to have standards on a lot of those kind of things across the country. I don't think that's appropriate. Now, this one I would agree with if they did it, but the philosophical issue, I'm not going to agree with no matter what. Like a federal minimum wage is a comparable example to me. I don't think a federal minimum wage is worth having. I think it's fair that the federal government says, hey, Tennessee, you're still at 5 1/4. That sucks. Do better. But I don't think it's okay for the federal government to come down and say, you know what, you're paying 7 1/4 now, whether you like it or not. I don't think that's fair or appropriate for the federal government to do. Not fair is not the right word. Appropriate. I don't think that's under. I don't think that needs to be under their realm of control. Because it's like, we were talking about it during COVID. Like, we got $600 checks,
something like that.
It's like $600 checks here. It's pretty good. It's pretty decent, useful. Goes a little ways. But if you're in New York or LA or something like that, $600 check ain't shit.
I think that was just what the federal government was adding. The state determines that as well.
Well, there was different programs at play, but the IRS at large just sent $600 to everybody.
Oh, the flat one. Okay,
yeah,
never mind.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And again, like, it makes no sense. Like, I get it, and I appreciate that they did it. I guess, I don't know. We can argue whether that's causing the inflation that we're dealing with now or not. Blah, blah, blah. Not the point. But it doesn't make any sense. Like, it's illogical in the sense that a $600 check to me here in Knoxville goes a little ways, where a $600 check to my friend that lives in Chicago doesn't even pay their utility bill.
How else do you make it equal across the board?
That's the problem with the federal government on issues like this. To me, they can't. They're incapable of making it logical or equal in any sense, because if they did it more logically, where it's like, well, some sort of equation that says cost of living in this in this township or county or whatever they want to break it down as, cost of living here is, $400 in Knoxville is equatable to $800 in Chicago. Well, I'd be pissed at that too. Why are you sending them $800, only sending me $400?
I think it would just be a mess if you really tried to break it down in the scale that you want it in.
I don't want it. Well, I get that's my point. Is I don't think it's appropriate at all. That's the kind of the point I'm getting to. Is the
idea of the stimulus check? You don't think it was a good idea?
I don't know that it was a good idea, or I don't know. I don't think it's. No. It's not whether or not the stimulus check is a good idea. Is that my point is that the federal government is going to be ineffectual in their intent with it. In the same way that I think that it's ineffectual and philosophically wrong that the federal government would put a uniform education standard across the country or anything else like that. That's my point I'm trying to get to. It's not whether or not I think those stimulus checks were worth having or not. It's whether they can do it in an effectual way. And I don't think they can. And that's why I don't think they should be the ones to do that kind of stuff. I don't think it makes sense. That's the point I'm getting to. It's not about whether I think the stimmies were cool or not. Because they were great.
I don't know. Never mind. Sorry.
Am I confusing? I feel like I confused myself a little bit when I was trying to say that.
I guess I'm just not understanding. You don't think they can do it in an effectual way?
Right. Because the effectual way would be to do the overcomplicated way that would be ineffectual because it would be really hard for them to do. The correct way to do it would be to figure out some cost of living equation and say that people here get this much, people there get that much, because realistically that's the same amount of money in a functional day-to-day. We're going to give you guys, give everybody...
Which you would admit would be hyper-complicated.
Yes.
Okay.
That's my point. Is that it is hyper-complicated because we are individual states and individual localities and all these different factors go into play. And so it's illogical to expect a central federal government to be able to do something effectually for everybody. So I don't think they should try to. I think they should leave that to the states and the locals to take care of. They should maybe help the states fund things and stuff like that. They should maybe work out with the states on how to fund certain things like this, but it doesn't make sense. And again, I'm not trying to pick on the stimmies per se, but it's the same thing with sex ed and others.
Okay.
I don't think federal standards make a lot of sense in this kind of in the conversation we're talking about. Yes, some federal standards do make sense. Interstate commerce and stuff like that, which is what I do believe the federal government is supposed to tend to. And so I don't have issues with the interstate commerce things that the federal government gets into, not in the same way I do things like this.
Sure.
So, anyway, it's like, okay, so like,
I don't know. We were in high school. I think I don't know if it's the school or like the individual school itself, or if it was the county schools had that abstinence program that went around and talked to us for like an hour one day.
Right. And I remember we had regular sex ed too. I remember having to see pictures of syphilitic dicks and stuff like that.
Wait, what?
I remember we had, it was like,
And in our wellness class?
yeah.
Yeah.
It was a very short portion of another thing. Like it was inside another class. It was a very short portion.
Yeah.
Like
it was like our gym.
Week.
Our gym / like wellness class.
Right. It was like a week of the semester that we spent on it. And some of that included the abstinence only option teaching, whatever.
Yeah.
Which, you know, that's just a dumb, that in and of itself is a dumb premise.
Get them and say how to get STDs. Just don't do it.
Right.
All right. Have a good day.
You know, like, I mean, well, it's like Lil Man talking last week about all the kids vaping in the bathroom in the middle school.
Yeah.
It's like, I'll bet you a gajillion dollars that they've all been told that they shouldn't do that. And they're not allowed to do that.
I think I did see a story recently that it's actually down, I guess, at least from last year, as far as kids vaping.
Getting caught.
Yeah. That's why there's always that plus and minus error rate.
I'm gonna say, like, it's like that. That's the point. Of like try to teach abstinence as the only option is just dumb, because the same people that think teaching abstinence works for sex are the same people that think telling kids not to smoke doesn't get them smoking, or telling them not to drink they never drink.
All right.
That's not how kids work. Kids are going to do it, and some kids are going to do it more because you tell them they can't.
Mm-hmm.
And if your goal is to have issues, then tell them they can't. And so, anyway, but this, I guess, this all kind of rolls back to the same issues: is that I can't, you know, I don't know where Elaine Davis is on sex ed in schools. I don't remember if I asked her about it or not. I know I didn't ask her about it. That would have been a weird, embarrassing thing to ask somebody. You know what I'm saying? You know, I don't know where Janet Testament stands on the sex education in the school systems. I don't know where, I guess that was Greg Kaplan stands on that kind of thing. I know some of the generalities of what the assumption by party branding means to those things a little bit, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything either. And like how, you know, and so like part of what this lady was doing on the show, she was talking about, you know, they have an org that does a bunch of stuff and you can go and you can sign up and put in your zip code and they will send you like timely updates on when school board meetings are happening. And when elections come around, they'll endorse candidates that are pro what they think the correct method of sex ed is for students. And it's like, okay, that's a cool feature. That's a cool thing that you guys are putting together. I appreciate that you're doing that. But again, I don't know. When you go vote, what's like, when you're voting, yes, please. When you are voting, what are like the top 2 or 3 things that you think are the important things policy-wise for candidates that you want to learn, that you want to know about them before you're going to vote for them? I mean, the last 2 elections you did vote in because I make fun of you every time after Election Day. I guess my point is I don't think that when I went into the voting booth between Elaine Davis and Gregory Kaplan that, I didn't know their stances on it, obviously. We just mentioned that part. But even if I did... Would
that specific topic have weighed that heavily on your choice?
That's right. That's what I'm leading to right now, yes. You know, is where Elaine Davis is on, you know, trans rights, is where Elaine Davis is on, you know, labor issues, or where like there's 10,000 things plus that this person has some oversight on. How do I break that down, and where do I rank A, B, or C? And I'm just thinking probably for most Tennesseans, sex ed is not top of their list. Like, I like everything about this candidate except they want to teach abstinence only. Can't vote for them.
Right.
And so I got to vote for the person that I don't like anything about. But they're all about good quality sex education in the schools. And I think this goes back to what I think is the truism of the whole thing. I think if we actually had a more locally, if our local governments had more direct control and power over the things that go on locally, then it would actually matter. If I'm voting for school board candidate, if Kat Bike's telling me about how she thinks the correct way to teach sex ed is versus Will Edwards was running against her. Will Edwards is abstinence only. And then we have Kat Bike talking about it. It's like, well, you're going to the school board. Yes. Now, the reality is they have nothing to fucking do with that in the way the system works currently. But if they did have control over that, then when I'm looking at a school board candidate, yes, I think that would be a top 2 or 3 issue for me. How are we spending the money you got? Where are you at on getting more fucking bus drivers so we can get our kids in and out of school in a reasonable amount of time? Where are you at on getting us another school built? Where are you at on sex ed? I think those would be, reasonable questions for a school board person if they had control over those things. And I think that's why I think we need to flip over the way we need to flip over the way government works and the way we look at government as people. But yes, I know it's not going to happen, but I think that's the correct answer because I think it makes sense. It's doable. It's not doable in the way we do it now. Given the example just given, it's not doable that you can expect anybody running for District 18. Don't care whether they're MAGA Republicans or fucking full-on socialist Democrats running for District 18. There's no way that they're going to be able to cover the realm of issues in a way that's reasonably close to most anybody. There's going to be like 2% of the people that 100% agree with these people on everything.
Am I wrong to think on most things? I mean, outside of federal standards, you have, more quote unquote local standards as far as state rules on this or that.
State, yes. Local, no. And I think
that just goes back into you just can't have that many differing rules from county to county.
Elaine dodged it and tried to make me look bad in front of my scouts, and I'm still mad at her about it. But I told every parent at our scout meeting, I was like, you have problems with the schools, this is who you call. Don't call your school board rep. This is who you call. Because this person, your state representative, has way more to do with what's going on in your schools than she does, or than Kat Bike in this example does. And it's true. Now Elaine kind of dodged it in her response to that. She's like, "No, Kat Bike's very important. It's very important that you're involved with your local government entities and stuff like that." It's like, I'm not saying it's not important to be involved and to be in touch with Kat Bike when you're having issues with schools. But at the end of the day, when we want policy issues, when we want books and funding and what we're teaching in what classrooms, sex ed specifically in the conversation that we're talking about right now, if you want to talk to somebody that's going to make a difference in that, Elaine Davis is the one that does it, not Kat Bike.
Right. That's what I'm saying. There is that local control.
That's not local control. That's state control.
Local in the grand scheme.
Well, local as compared to federal, yes.
Yeah.
Like, I think the state should be in the middle. Yes, I think the state is correctly in the pyramid where it should be. I just think the federal and the local have flipped over. I think the most important government body.
So what added controls do you think the state has that you would rather be in county hands?
All this, like everything we're talking about right now as far as education, I think the Knox County Board of Education should have 90% of control of what goes on in our kids' schools. And I think the state, I grant the premise that the state can set some statewide standards. It says, if you're going to graduate from a Tennessee high school, you have to know X, Y, and Z. I can get behind the idea that the state can, that the state can do some things on the very top level of it for some sort of unification across the state, but very basic, simple stuff. Like, you have to go through the whole 12 years of education. You can't graduate in 10 without some special exemption or something like that. You can't skip a grade without some special testing or something. Like I could get on board with the state getting behind some shit like that. I could get on board with the state having control over how the TSSAA works as far as, school sports going in and out of county. I can get behind a central governing body in that kind of sense. But in the day-to-day, what goes on in the classrooms, what they're allowed to teach, what materials they're allowed to use to teach, how many teachers in the classroom, where the money is coming from and where the money is going, should be here. It doesn't make sense that it goes to national and comes back. It doesn't make sense that we are what they call the donor county, that a significant amount more is collected from Knox County than the county gets to fund its own schools. I'm not saying we shouldn't pitch in some. I'm not saying there shouldn't be some sort of program put together so that the big counties that can't afford it can kick in to help some of the small counties out to get what they need. But it shouldn't be determinate by some weird state formula that nobody fucking understands. And to where that you have a county and a city government for having to get, I mean, we can argue about it. The county, Mayor Jacobs is never going to do it. But at some point, whether Mayor Jacobs wants to or not, he's going to have to raise taxes. And not because he wants to or doesn't want to. It's because state mandates on what we have to spend on our schools, whether the state sends us the money or not, the county has to spend it. And if the county doesn't have the money to spend it, they have to tax it. Even if the state makes them do it. Doesn't matter. And that's just weird to me. It doesn't make sense. Because the state says you have to spend at least as much that you did last year plus some sort of inflationary number. And the assumption is, at least on people looking at this new funding formula, is the amount the state kicks in is going to stay pretty flat. But as inflation and everything else and the cost of doing everything goes up, the state funding is not going to be enough to continue funding it in the way it needs to be funded. So at some point, the county is going to have to kick in more than they're already kicking in, which is more than any other counties kicking in except for Shelby, wherever Chattanooga is, and Davidson.
Yeah.
So anyway, the point being is that I think if, our tax dollars stayed here and did our stuff and then we kicked a little bit out and let the state redistribute that amongst places that need it, okay, I'm not opposed to that. But everything going to the state first just doesn't make sense to me. Because A, there's a whole set of bureaucracy that costs money for no real value to manage the rotation of this money in and out and back. But B, it also puts the control of everything. The control of everything's still in the state either way, but then it gives the state another level of control, not just the writing the laws and and whatever in Nashville, but also in the sense that they can withhold funds, like some of the shit they were doing to Shelby County about this whole voucher pilot program thing out there. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
So that's my rant on school stuff. What was it? Was there anything else in that episode? Yeah, I think that about covered my... I think she sent me that episode because it was all politics of education more than it was about anything specifically sexually oriented that you want to be able to have a conversation with the kids about.
Yeah.
Because I'll go on this rant with the kids all day. I don't care. This one there's no awkward feelings from me on this rant. I mean, I've had a few times, I'm trying to think what was the other day. Who said something to me in the car and I had to bite my tongue. And it was something about, I don't remember, but it was something like, I'm just going to leave that alone. I really want to go off on that, but I don't think it's going to be good for anybody.
Right. Sometimes it's better not to say anything.
Yeah, sometimes. I suck at that game. So, yeah, be on the lookout for that in the next session, this new grading thing and some other intentional stuff from the state. But every member of the House is on the ballot next November. So make your voice on them. Be like, hey, you want to keep that seat? You better not do this thing. Because I will not vote for you again if you do this thing. If that's your jam. But again, I'm so conflicted on how I feel about the schools and whether the vouchers are a good idea or a bad idea. I have a fundamental issue with public education. I think there is an underlying mixed incentive at play that I don't particularly care for.
That's why I think it's almost kind of a semi-push to kind of like this private/corporate education.
But I mean, so I did alumni band today, and there is some part of being in a group like that, there is some collective brainwash propagandizing as part of the thing. Is there any real value? Yes, I got my education. The band was part of that education, but not really. It was really just kind of a extracurricular that I did because I enjoyed it. But I'm back in the band room. I haven't sung the alma mater in 15 years, maybe 20 years. And the last thing you do at every rehearsal, last thing we did at every rehearsal when I was there too, is we sing the alma mater. Everybody puts their arms around each other. It's big, just massive. Like it was like, how many fucking people was it? 410 and 460 respectively. There's 460 alumni, 410 original regular band. So whatever that is, 870 people all packed in this one room. Just came out of rehearsal, just chaos and all that kind of stuff. We stopped what we're doing, put our arms around each other, we sing the alma mater. Sang every word, knew every word by heart, and got a little mushy, got a little misty. Got a little emotional on it. And it's like, and so in the context of what we're talking about education-wise, I'm thinking about that. It's like, there is some nostalgia in it for me. Obviously, that's a big part of it for me. But, we're going through pregame, doing the national anthem and all the different little stuff. We had a fucking fighter jet flyover and shit like that. And it's like, what is that? Like, what actually is that? Like this idea, like being a fan of a team or having a loyalty to a university, an educational place. Like, what is that? Like what is the actual day-to-day value in it? There's a little bit of a community sense, I guess, especially since I still live in Knoxville, and people tell stories about how they don't live in Knoxville anymore, but they'll be at a bar or something like that trying to watch the UT game, and they'll talk to the bartender into turn it on, and somebody across the bar will be like, yeah, I'm a UT fan, and they'll sit together and talk to each other and have a great time watching the game stuff. That's cool stuff about it. But like realistically, like what is a homecoming? Like what's the point other than fundraising, because it is a fundraising event? Like there's a
you do have that, kind of like you're talking about that collective opportunity.
There's like a propaganda to it. Like it's a sales machine. Like the machine is trying to sell you to be loyal to it over time.
Yeah, there's, I guess, that monetary value of it, but I think there is that also intrinsic collective value of it. It is being that bringing that community back together.
Like, I'm not saying I'm not susceptible. I'm not saying I didn't enjoy it.
Right.
I'm just saying that there, like, if you
there's some people that capitalize on that.
But at a practical level, to me personally, in my day-to-day life, like every day except today, because I went to alumni band. What is University of Tennessee band athletics? What does that mean to me at all? Like, what does that do for me? Where is my need for that thing to exist? It's not beautiful.
You're just asking existential
questions. But that's what I'm saying, though. But that's part of the thing. That's part of every educational body does that in some way, shape, or form. And our public school systems do it too. They start the process of teaching kids how to become loyal fans of their schools. Like we have things that the Rocky Hill kids do, where they have like, go Rams and all that kind of shit because we're the Rocky Hill Rams, and there's like an insertion of this like camaraderie of the school you went to thing. And do we think for a second that there's not a broader statewide and or national injection of feelings into people through the education system?
Like what?
I mean, just the way we teach parts of history, our parts of history. Like, did the U.S. win World War II?
No.
Like were we the deciding factor in World War II? At least in Europe?
Very, very possibly.
The way I was taught it, to my recollection, was that we were. There was no way. The Nazis were taking all of Europe without us. And we jumped in and we turned the tide and we won the war.
Yeah.
That's how I was taught it. Now, why would they teach it that way if it's not true?
It's mostly true, but it's still up for debate, or a matter of debate.
Ken Burns, was it Ken Burns does all those crazy cool documentaries?
Yeah.
I think it's Ken Burns has one where he basically says, no, it's Russia. Russia is the reason that the Allies won World War II. There was no way.
Yeah, I mean, there's debate that Russia may have been able to accomplish it. It may have taken longer.
Right. What truly changed the tide in World War II was Hitler's dumb idea to invade Russia. If Hitler hadn't invaded Russia, he would have been fine. Didn't matter whether we were involved or not. Doesn't matter. My point, that's not that. Again, we don't have to go to arguments over the history of it. But why would they teach it that way? Why would they teach it in such a blanket? Like you're the one that doesn't like it when we're number one shit.
A lot of countries do it.
Okay, I'm not disagreeing with that. But isn't that like is that an education? Getting taught how to feel about the history of your country, and that your country's the best? Is that an important piece of education to make the thing work?
In a small way, yeah.
What do you mean?
It does help build that pride, patriotism.
Okay. What does pride and patriotism do? You know,
it makes you want to work and do well for your country and fellow citizens.
Do you think so?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm like, I don't know. I'm gonna have to put some thought into that phrase. It certainly gets you. It certainly gets kids to sign up for armed services over time. It's certainly part of that process. That's how we get our soldiers.
Yeah.
And patriotism. I'm trying to think. Do we know anybody that signed up after 9/11? We were 20.
I think so.
I feel like we do. I feel like we know a couple people.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't know. I think I think part of the problem I have with public education is that that's part of public education. And I guess I'm not sure I like that part of public education. I don't want my kids getting 11, 12 years of we're the best, rah, rah, rah. We bring freedom and joy and everything we do, and we go around the world and we spread our democracy, which is the best way to live, and this, that, and the other. I don't know if I want that instilled in my kids over 13 years in the public education system.
Okay.
And there's no way around it in the public education system. There's no way that's not going to be included in the process. Because the people that depend on those things happening are the people that build it, that built the public education system, that run it to this day. You're never going to have somebody in the top tiers of public education that isn't going to be instilling patriotism as part of their curricula. It's guaranteed.
I'm trying to think if those that are actually, well, I guess they do have a big hand in the public education system, but the ones that are actually picking out the specific textbooks.
Repeat, please.
So I'm wondering, as far as like who chooses the textbooks. I mean, there is a bit of hand in hand in the textbook publishers and
right. That's a whole other rabbit hole.
And those that pick them out. But as far as, I guess it'd be the State Board of Education that picks what textbooks to use.
It's a good question. I don't know the answer. I mean, it's not the Knox County.
I mean, that's essentially what you're then.
It's not Knox County Schools or the school board.
That's what you're then, expecting to a certain extent your teachers are teaching out of. They're getting a free ball to an extent from there.
Right. At least it's whatever. Yeah. Yes.
So, I mean, as far as the education system, as far as who's picking what's being taught, I guess you do have your elected politicians. Well,
I mean, it's either the politician themselves or an appointed body of, the state commission on schools or whatever.
Right.
That's doing the actual book picking, but all the people on there are put on there by they're appointees of elected bodies or elected officials. And so we elect the people to pick the people to make those choices for us.
Right.
Which again, on the premise, I kind of like, I follow the idea of, I certainly don't expect Elaine Davis to have enough depth of knowledge in education in a specific subject to be the one to go out and pick out which trigonometry book we're using. She might be math smart. I don't mean to say she's not. She might be into trig, and she might be a good person to pick that, but I'm going to guess not, and so I'm going to stick with the example of I wouldn't want Elaine Davis picking the trigonometry book our kids learn from, because I don't know that she has any background in understanding what the best material to make said decision is.
Yeah.
And so the like in a very perfect world combination of things, sure, it makes sense that Elaine Davis should be part of a team who appoints a team to make those decisions who are better educated on those things. But then you have like a Betsy DeVos character who Trump puts in as the federal head of education, who is probably not the person you want picking textbooks out.
Didn't she have ties to some? I thought she had ties to some book manufacturers.
Probably. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. But, I mean, just point being is like I wouldn't want her choosing what color T-shirt my kids wear, let alone what they're supposed to be educated by.
Yeah.
And so, again, you know, and so that like, that's part of that, like, on a fundamental premise, that's part of my problem with public education, is that no matter what, politics are part of it. You know, because I argue that I don't think civics matters to our state education system because our elected officials got where they are because we don't know how civics works. And if they bother teaching us how civics works, we might not elect them again. We might not continue to go down this dumb rabbit hole that we're currently in. And so why would they teach us how to get rid of them? They're not going to teach us how to get rid of them. That just doesn't make sense. And so again, that's where I have a fundamental issue with public education. The idea of public education, that it's a public good, that it's something we should all contribute to, and that it should be a public good. Yes, great idea. But the practice of the idea is just impractical to me. There's no way that a Betsy DeVos type character would exist without the politics of our education system. And then the way that the politics of our education system bleeds into what we educate our kids. And so the idea of getting our kids out of this weird cycle of politics to educate them separately from that so that they can become, you know, civically minded adults that actually understand how this thing works instead of some weird, really basic civics that just says vote for an ROD and go on with your life. It doesn't sound bad to me.
I mean, we didn't delve into it too much in high school. I don't think it wasn't until our senior year and maybe a little bit in freshman year that we kind of got into some civics.
I don't remember any of it. I'm not saying we didn't do it. I don't remember a lot of shit from high school, to be fair. I mean, like I said, it was like 2 years ago now, but I actually used Pythagorean theorem in practice. Never actually did the project, but I actually sat down with a piece of paper, drew my triangle,
did the math,
had the width and the height. Wanted to figure out what the diagonal was. A squared plus B squared. Got that C number and square rooted that bitch. And I was like, hey, I need a board that's this long to do what I'm trying to do here.
Yeah.
And I was super proud of myself because I learned that in Knox County schools. So, but like I said, I think like I don't hate teachers. I don't hate public educators. I don't hate people that are in the public education system. I just think it is impractical to expect our elected officials to keep the politics out of the process, to keep the politics out of the classroom. I mean, hell, like that's what all this, like the don't say gay shit in Florida is right now. That's the politics. That's the woke culture politics, anti-woke culture politics, whatever the fuck it is that DeSantis and all them are going crazy over. That's them inserting this woke culture shit into the classroom because they don't want.
Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day, and it's kind of ironic, and I wonder if they realize that, you know, they're like, you can't be indoctrinating people, so we're going to teach you how to. We're going to indoctrinate you. Teach you how to not indoctrinate.
But that's that joke phrase that you just said is what my problem with public ed is it's an indoctrination system one way or the other. It's just which party has control or which body has more power and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's an indoctrination system. Does it matter? Like, does it really matter that in the the train leaves San Francisco with, you know, train leaves San Francisco at 8 a.m. and a train leaves whatever, and somewhere in that word problem they mentioned the fact that there's a gay couple on the train coming from San Francisco, that's, you know, does it matter that that's included in the word problem? Probably not. Not functionally to my ability to make the answer, but it also is it
subliminal messaging.
Is it worth putting in there? No. You know, like I get both arguments. Like, why would you put it in there if you weren't trying to throw something, like if you weren't trying to normalize this thing or whatever you want to call it?
That's what I was about to say. I think it is essentially normalizing it.
Yeah, but if it's not part of the actual math, what's the point of adding it? You know, if we're trying to teach the math, why are we throwing gay couples in? It's not, there's, you know, again, it doesn't matter. That's not my point. My point is that is an example of why public ed is a problem, because public ed is controlled by the state, and the state of Florida has decided that anything that references non-traditional sexualities or whatever that in any of their materials is not allowed. Is it important that it is or isn't allowed? Probably not. It probably doesn't make a fucking difference to 99% of the actual education process.
I don't get the not teaching gender to, like, I guess, kindergarten through third. I don't understand how you don't. But at some point in kindergarten, you're doing picture, like family pictures. You kind of got to gender.
I don't.
The people in the picture.
I mean, to me,
like, as far as like they were talking about like gender roles and whatnot.
Like, to me, it's a nature nurture. It's a backwards nature nurture argument at play. It's like, if you don't let, like, it's maybe it's a hear no, see no, speak no evil in play. If they don't see gay, if they don't hear gay, they can't be gay. Nah, maybe. I doubt it. But at the end of the world, at the end of the day, they're going to see gay somewhere. They may not see it in the schools, but they're going to see it somewhere. It's 2023 in the United States of America. This country is gay shit. So you're not going to hide it from them. It's fucking everywhere. So to make a big deal about it, going back in, a little callback to our earlier conversation, the more you say it's not okay, the more likely it is to happen. Don't smoke, kids. I'm going to try to smoke it. Don't drink, kids. I'm going to try drinking. Don't have sex, kids. I'm going to have sex. I might even have sex with a boy. You told me I couldn't. You told me not to have sex, and you told me the gay was bad. I did both at the same time, Dad. Fuck you. I mean, what do you like? I don't understand what they like. Again, the lack of logic in their thinking is part of the problem to me, and how illogical that thought process is. But again, it's a perfect example of where the fundamental issue with public education is for me. It's the fundamental issue. It's not necessarily an issue with public ed or public educators at large. It's that whether you like it or not, and again, this goes back to this is certainly why I don't think we should have a federal board of education that has any real control over it either way. Because imagine if you really had felt like existentially threatened by the way that Tennessee is approaching certain topics in their school systems. Like, imagine, like, it was like you really thought it was a threat to you and your family for if you were in Florida for this don't say gay thing. Like, there's one that I do have an issue with, and like I really like one that I heard about. I think it was Florida too. Is that maybe it's California? I don't remember what it was. It was something about they were giving. Yeah, it was California or Oregon that. If a school finds out you're gay, that there was some legislation trying to obligate them. I don't know. Something about not telling your parents.
What?
Which I thought was crazy. Like that they it was something about like maybe it was Texas. I don't remember. I can't remember which way it went. Whether it was saying that they couldn't tell your parents or that they had to tell your parents by law. Like if you were at school and you came out and like your teachers knew it and your friends knew it and all that kind of stuff, but somehow your parents didn't know that the law was going to say that they could or could not actually tell your parents. I can't remember which way it is. And the could not, I think it was could not tell your parents. And it's like, I think I have a little issue with that. Now to say that they have to tell your parents is another thing that I might have an issue with too. Because if you go to a guidance counselor in kind of confidence and say, I think it might be gay, guidance counselor, and the state law says the guidance counselor has to notify their parents of that, I'm not sure that's a good idea. Anyway, but if you thought that the way that Florida, if you lived in Florida and you thought the way that Florida was educating your kid, like it was going to be a problem that you're a gay couple and you have a kid, and when you're doing the kindergarten drawing of your family, that there was going to be an issue because your kid draws two dads. And the teacher is going to be put in an awkward spot because they're not allowed to talk about the fact that you have two dads because they're not allowed to talk about it, even though that's what you drew in your picture and that's the truth to you. And it's going to be a weird thing, and it's going to be a weird issue for your kid. I could see that as being an issue. But at least you could move to Georgia, and as not that it's easy to just up and move, but if it's an existential threat, you'll figure out how to do it. Like if you think this is a threat to your life, or your child's life and wellness, you'll figure out how to do it. You can move to Georgia or one of the Carolinas or out to California, whatever it is you got to do. You'll figure it out if you think it's an actual existential threat. If we had a federal board of education that somehow got to where Florida's is, you're going to leave the country? Now, again, if it's existential, you'll figure it out. But that's a big difference in moving from Florida to Georgia as opposed to moving from Florida to Cuba. So, anyway, I get why the people on the Speak group don't like me for being open to the idea of vouchers, but I don't get why. I don't understand why public ed is the only answer. Because public ed it is impossible for public ed to ever be devoid of public, and the public includes the politics, and the politics make public ed what it is. And there's no way around that. There's just no way around that. If public ed is the only answer, then you have to win it. You have to win at politics to be happy with it. If you're winning at politics, if you're on the team that's winning in your state, then you're going to be happier with your public education system than if you're on the team, or if you're on the losing team in politics, you're not going to be as happy with your public ed because it's public ed. There's no way around that.
John Oliver had I think it was last week's on homeschooling. It was really interesting.
The kids aren't as weird as everybody says they are.
Well, no, he more focused on that a lot of states have like little to any regulation on like homeschooling whatsoever. There's a good number of states like that the parents don't even have to like notify the state that like, hey, I've taken them out. And then like you don't have to like report. I think Tennessee is one of the few that like once a year, I think you have to write a letter that's saying I'm still homeschooling so and so.
Yeah, and that's because of the way Tennessee formula works.
Yeah,
because
apparently like a lot of states,
the state wants to know if you're in Knox County and you're homeschooling. The state wants to know that because then they send Knox County $10,000 less a year, give or take.
Yeah.
For every homeschool kid in Knox County schools gets less in funding from the state.
They were saying like a lot of them like they don't ever like cross-reference if there's been like domestic abuse. Because a lot of times, abusive parents will take their kids out of school because that was the one place that they got caught.
Yeah, because they come into school, they left school with no bruises. They come in the next morning with bruises.
Right.
Where'd they come from, friend?
Right.
And yeah, that sucks.
And a good number of states, there's like little to any like monetization on it whatsoever.
I mean, I'm inferring from what you're saying that you think that you and John Oliver think that's a problem.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I can agree in the sense that an abusive parent using that as a tool to be able to hide their abusive behaviors is a problem. Don't disagree with that. But at the end of the day, it's my kid. And how I want to raise my kid, I would think, should be up to me.
No holds bar?
Yeah, no, I don't think abuse is okay. I don't think abusive parents are okay, and I think there should be something. I think I am okay with the premise of the state stepping in and removing a child from a household if the parents are incessantly abusive. Yes, I agree with that premise. But again, that goes to one of the problems that teachers have every day, is that's another job title that they have to carry.
Right.
That they're not equipped, prepared, trained on how to deal with. But if I if I had some 100 acres out in the woods and I wanted to keep my kid home and teach him how to work the land and live the life and do all those things, and I'm a good and loving and caring parent, it's none of the state's fucking business as far as I'm concerned. And realistically, a letter to the state doesn't change anything for me. It's not like I pay less taxes because I don't take my kid to school.
Right.
So I don't give a shit. I mean, again, I'm not okay with abuse parts of it, but is that abusive? Would that be considered abusive? I decided I wanted to live in a cabin in the woods with my kids. They get food, they get water. I'm teaching them how to live right by my standards. Or somebody else's standards.
I think it would depend on the situation.
Mine.
I think there's like basic standards that supersede your own personal standards.
Yeah. Like, I don't beat them
Right.
for fun. I can agree with that.
Yeah.
But, again, assuming I'm not an abusive parent. But, I mean, I think there are people out there that would consider me, I think there are people out there that would consider people not using the public education system as abusive to a child. And I disagree with that premise.
Right.
Whether I'm homeschooling my kids or I send them to a private school or whatever.
I would say more if you're not actually, I guess, educating them in at least some way.
I think I think some of the athlete parents are abusive. I made this premise. They're not hitting them. They're not beating them.
Right. But they're depriving them of.
But they're depriving them of all social or anything outside of that because all they care about is them being good at the sport.
Right.
Whether the kid cares about it or not.
Right.
I think that's abusive. Do I think I have the right to step in and take the kid from those parents? Fuck no. And so, I don't know. That's the spot. It's a tough one. I get it. It's complicated. Doesn't mean I resent the premise of saying it's complicated makes it not worthy of talking about. But, I don't think. I think I guess maybe what jumps out to me in the John Oliver part that you're talking about is this assumption of the worst. I feel like there's an assumption of the worst in that. That there's an assumption that
I think
it's more likely to be the bad side of it.
It was more, and I can't remember. There was like an organization that even there's a lot of people that are a part of this that don't agree with like the extremity of kind of what they want as far as like their freedom to freely homeschool. Is that even on the most essential basic level of, hey, let's at least do a background check on parents that want to take their kids out of the public school system before they want to, homeschool themselves and make sure there's not a criminal record of this.
I mean, do they background check parents that are in regular school? I mean, they do now, actually, which is fucked up. I kind of think it's fucked up. I'm not sure. It's fucking weird. Yeah, I think it's fucked up. You have to have a background check to be a chaperone. You have to have a background check to be a chaperone for a field trip and shit now.
Doesn't surprise me.
I think it's fucked up.
I think it's one way that schools can at least try to insulate themselves from instances.
I mean, yes, I can understand the lawyer's sales pitch on it, for sure. But, again, it's this assumption of the worst. It's like, yeah, I'm a private person. I don't want to give you that information. I just want to go with my kid to the fucking Museum of Appalachia, where there's 500 kids there and 250 adults, and I'm going to be one of those 750 people. Your assumption that I need to prove my worthiness to be here is fucking bullshit. I don't want to go through the process of doing a background check. It's a hassle. It's a waste of time.
You're not having to do it. All you got to do is give them your name, fill out a form.
No, you have to provide it. They don't do it for you. You have to go. You have to bring it. Like it's like a permission slip for you to go on the field trip.
You have to pay for a background check to be done upon you?
Yeah.
How's this work?
Yeah, you have to go get a background check done and present it to them with your I'm coming with my kid on the field trip.
Okay.
Doesn't matter. I mean, either way, it's the premise is that there's that like it's the assumption of the worst that I guess I have the problem with. I'm the most pessimistic person I think maybe around, and I try not to look at people that way. I try to assume the best out of people. I try not to assume that they're fucking assholes all the time. People prove me wrong a lot, but I don't know. I think that's a bummer that that's the way the world is turning. I get why they're doing it. I'm not arguing with the logic behind why they're doing it. It's just disappointing that that's the state that things have come to. Because realistically, all like on a percentage basis, most of those things are considerably down over time. Now they still exist, and probably on a pure numbers basis, they're probably up just because of population. But as a percentage of the populace, I'm pretty confident that a lot of these abuse things are way down.
I couldn't say the numbers on it specifically.
But then this, but even in that, I don't want to go. Yes, I do. The same people that are advocating for things like this are the same people that were advocating for schools to stay closed longer during COVID, where you're forcing kids to stay home, and where the complex stresses of the situation made it probably more likely for abuse to happen, or neglected minimum, because I have, work or something to do, and I have no option with my kids, so I leave them home alone or something stupid. It's a consistency issue. Doesn't matter. You got some news of the weird?
Not a good one.
Man, it's like 5 weeks in a row, man. Why don't you spend like 2 hours a day at your desk at work researching this shit?
Because I'm working when I'm at my desk at work.
Oh, I know.
Don't have 2 hours to dawdle on the internet.
The sad thing is I do have
I was trying to find like random sites that might actually have other like weird news, but none of those turned up anything decent.
Just do Onion headlines, because then it'll just be funny. I don't know.
There was some NBA game that 3-point line apparently was painted further back than it should be. It's weird.
I don't know how that happens. I don't know. There's one of my favorite like Jerry Rice stories ever. It's after he retired. He was with like NFL Network or something like that, and he was doing a pregame show, and he's, and so they're on the field hanging out with the players while they're getting warmed up and all that kind of stuff. And I don't remember who it was. I'm pretty sure it was a San Francisco game, and so maybe it was Steve Young still playing. I don't remember who, but they're just kind of sitting there, talking like they do in the pregame. He's doing his job as an analyst and talking to players and all that stuff. And I guess whoever the quarterback was, he's like, "I'm going to run this route. It hit me." And so he goes and he lines up, and the quarterback guys lines up in his spot, and they say go, and he runs the route, and guy throws the ball. It's a great throw. He catches it right at the sideline, and his feet are out of bounds. He's like, that ain't right. So he goes to the ref. He's like, they painted these lines wrong. And or not the ref, but he goes to somebody and tells them they painted these lines wrong. After the game, they went back and remeasured, and the field was like a quarter yard short in width. Like from sideline to sideline, it was like a quarter yard smaller than it was supposed to be. And he just knew that from he lined up where he knows he lines up, and so he knows where he's just so good. He's so good at being the receiver that he knows exactly where the sideline is. And since it was 6 inches closer than he expected it to be, he couldn't be wrong. The field was wrong.
Right.
And he was right. Which is crazy.
It's not me.
Oh, I saw an installation van that does the fake grass residentially.
Yeah, it's becoming semi-popular. Or I wouldn't say popular, but it's growing in popularity.
No, it's not. It's not growing at all. That was my best joke maybe ever. I love that joke. I'm proud of that joke.
Uh-huh.
I'm super proud of that joke. You set me up perfectly. I'm proud of you for getting that joke.
Sure.
Oh, all right. This is the state of things. I'm tired, people. Got up at 5 this morning. You have no idea what time it is right now, so that has no reference to the listenership. So yeah, Election Day is Tuesday. Don't bother, because it doesn't matter, apparently. I don't know. I guess one of the things that's left in this is that, and Jesse was talking about this, and I think he's supposed to write a story on this, so maybe I shouldn't talk about it, but I'll do it anyway. It seems like voters just don't like developers. And it goes back to my theory that and as time transpires, the more I think I'm right. Nobody likes growth. Nobody does. And voting for a developer is voting for growth.
Yeah, but maybe it's more so people like a sense of consistency.
I get it.
And a lot of people just associate growth with added traffic.
Sure. I get it in the sense that if I lived in Choteau 30 years ago, when I first moved to Knoxville, if I lived out there in Choteau, where there was 50 people lived in what is now considered Choteau, that now has a couple thousand households. If I lived out there 50 years ago, I would be upset about what it's become. But I don't think, one, I don't think it's up to you as a person who lives in a place to decide what your neighbor does with their yard, for lack of a better word. So if you don't like the fact that the farmer next door to your farm sold his land to somebody who came in and built 50 houses on it, tough shit as far as I'm concerned. That's not really your business on what he does with his land, or what the person he sells it to does with their new land. But I mean, growth is inevitable. It's going to happen in some way, shape, or form. And if you are living in a metro area that Knoxville is, whether we're going to make it a metro government or not doesn't really matter, but if you're living in the greater Knoxville metro area, I don't know how you could live here and not expect it. I don't know how you could have been living here and not expect it. Like my parents, for example, we've lived here they moved into that house in 94, 95. So that's almost 30 years ago they moved into that house. I don't know. I haven't asked them. Maybe I'll ask my dad. We're having lunch on Monday. When he moved into that house, actually, I know part of the answer to this, because that neighborhood that they moved into, they were one of the first in that neighborhood to move in, and they knew the development was going to expand into what it is becoming now, and it's not even done with it hasn't fully phased through its whole development yet. They knew that. My dad moved into that neighborhood knowing the growth was coming. And I would assume that anybody, especially at my dad's age at the time, which was a little bit older than I am now, at least had the wherewithal to look around and say, we're moving into a place that is going to grow. Not just the neighborhood we live in is going to grow, but the street that our neighborhood feeds into is going to grow. The schools that my kids go to are going to grow. The roads that get me from A to B are going to grow. The traffic is going to grow. Like I can't imagine unless you lived way out on the very outskirts of everything that you didn't know that it was coming.
I mean, it's going to anticipate level of growth over 10 to 15 to 20 years.
I mean, I think it's accelerated a little faster than anybody expected recently. Yes. But even at an accelerated rate, it doesn't change the reality that you had to know it was coming. There's no way you didn't know it was coming.
They had to know it was coming, but I don't think, like you said, I think people would have been more accepting of it if it was slightly more gradual. But like you said, in the past, 3-4 years, it's accelerated.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely accelerated, but I don't think, I don't think that matters in the grand scheme of nobody likes growth conversation.
I think it matters in the level of pushback on it.
The acceleration, I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that. I get what you're saying. I'm not saying you're wrong per se. I just don't know if I agree with that. I think people have somehow deluded themselves into the idea that when I go in, everything stops. Even though I came into a development, even though I came in because of growth, I came in, it stops here. Because what I came into is what I wanted, not what I came into becoming what it's going to be. I don't want what it's going to be. I don't know. I just don't buy it. I mean, I get what you're saying as far as acceleration kind of changing the visual a little bit, make it a little bit more blatantly obvious. But I don't think that's I
mean, I think it's one thing to move into a subdivision. Like the example you gave of your parents, where you move into a subdivision that has, expected, gradual growth, because it wasn't even done yet. Yeah, they hadn't even finished.
Sure, but it's a subdivision in the middle of what was a little bit more rural-ish, not really of Knoxville. No, yeah. But there was plenty of land around it that was very similar to it. There were plenty of other beginnings of developments like it in the near vicinity. It wasn't one development going in a large area. It was one of many going in the same large area.
Right.
Like, you knew it. You have no excuse to not know it's coming.
But if you're in a more rural, where there was actual farmland out there, that's one thing that's kind of hard to anticipate. Like, okay, that's going to turn into a giant subdivision.
I mean, I get
10 years from now.
I get what you're saying, but I don't know if I buy that. I just don't know if I buy it. Like, especially in the way Knoxville's growing out. Like, I made the Choteau example accidentally on purpose in the sense that, Choteau was very rural, very farmy 30 years ago. And I could see somebody who'd been out there for 20 years prior being really upset. But if you'd just gone out of Choteau 30 years ago, you went out there for a reason. You went out there for a reason because it had some space, but it was also accessible to the things you wanted to have. And if it's accessible and appealing to you, it's going to be accessible and appealing to others. And it's not the developers or the big bad wolf that are going to come and take advantage of that accessibility that's appealing. It's that developers are smart and other people want what you don't want what you have directly per se, but they want the accessibility. They agree that they know that other people have that appeal, and the developer is going to sell that appeal. I don't think that doesn't make the developer a bad person. It makes them aware of the market at play and making things available to people to make it. But again, we're kind of all over the map on what I guess I'm trying to get to. I don't know. So one of the things that people talk about in politics a lot is property value. We want our property value to go up, but not our property taxes. But we want our property value to go up. I want my asset, the number one asset for most Americans is their home. I certainly don't want it to get cheaper over time. That's bad. That's real bad. So if I want my asset to increase in value, that's because it's desirable. It's desirable because people want to be here. And so really the only argument against growth in the standard political sense is I'm just trying to protect my asset, period. And the data doesn't agree with your hate on growth for that, for the most part, either. Most growth isn't affecting the asset value. There's arguments of, and when you get real nitpicky on very certain specific developments going in next to certain things, there is some data that's kind of A/B on whether it protects your home value in the process. But at the end of the day, you're not losing money in your house. You want your house to be worth more year in, year out. And I think, but the only way that works is that if the desire stays there. And if the desire stays there, that's because other people want to be there. So you want growth in the sense that growth in the community is growth in the value of your home, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But you just want the growth, but people just want the growth in the value of their home, not the growth in the community. Because they don't want to deal with what that brings. And I don't disagree with them. It's annoying. It's a pain in the ass. Traffic sucks.
The value of your home can go up also just by other surroundings. They add a parking down the road. You have better infrastructure as far as bus stops, sidewalks, right, etc.
Which therefore, again, makes it more appealing, which makes it more likely that growth is going to happen.
Very possibly, yeah.
And so, but that's my point, is that all the things that make the value of your home better are going to make growth. If you want growth, if you don't want growth, then you don't want your home value to go up. Because the only way you're not going to have growth coming along with it is if your home value goes down. If your neighborhood turns into a slum neighborhood over time.
Yeah.
That's the only way I can think of where you're not going to have growth coming along with it, because you're going to have people leaving, boarding up their windows, abandoned homes, abandoned people next door, and then your home value goes down. And you don't want that. And I'm not a fan of A-B conversations, but I'm pretty sure this is an A-B. Like, the only realistic thing that could kill my home value right now is if, like, all my neighbors fled and nobody bought their houses. They just left and just abandoned their homes. And then the county would come in and take possession after tax issues, and then the county would try to sell them. And if somehow through all that process nobody wants to buy all the houses in my neighborhood for some reason,
right,
my home value is in the tank. But yay, no growth. So I win. And so again, it's just such a weird. It's a weird issue to me, because I want growth personally. I want growth as professionally. I want a ton of growth. The more growth we have, the more chance I have to make more money in my businesses. I'm great with growth. As a homeowner here, I have my issues. I don't like going through traffic. I don't like the consolidation of certain tangible goods, as far as grocery stores are getting bigger and farther away instead of smaller and closer. Luckily we have Butler and Bailey over here, and apparently it's never going to leave, and I'm good with that. But, like the way the commercial parts of things are changing over time is I'm not a big fan of, because it makes me travel more, and the more traffic happens, the more travel more sucks, and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But, I want growth. I want growth in this neighborhood. Like, the way things are going, I'm going to sell this house for $1 million in a couple of years. Kids are going to move out and be like, you know what? I'm going to sell this house. And the market value at the time is going to be a $1 million fucking house somehow.
Yeah.
This house ain't no $1 million fucking house.
Right.
But that's where the market's at, and so I'm going to take it.
That's what they think it is.
Yep. I'm going to take it. I'm going to buy an RV, and I'm going to just drive.
Yeah.
And so, that's a win for me. I don't know how else to put that. Like, that's a super win for me. Like, here's what's crazy is little house, 925 square feet, just over the hill here in the city of Knoxville. 3-bedroom, 1 bathroom. Literally, the guy says to me when I call him on it, he's like, 2 adults. It's like, what? He's like, 2 adults, maybe a kid or 2, but no more than 2 adults. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, it's a plumbing thing, man. I was like, oh, you're still on septic. He's like, yeah. I was like, so you got an old septic system, and you don't want more than 2 adults renting this place because you're gonna have to pump your septic tank all the time. And he said something about he's got a sewage line run, he just hasn't hooked it up yet. I was like, well, hook it up, man. Why are you waiting to hook it up? That doesn't make any sense. But $1,500 for a 3-bedroom, 952 square foot house on the very edge of the city of Knoxville. And I said, that's reasonable. In the back of my head, I was like, that's not bad. That's fucking crazy. We paid like $650 for that fucking pink house.
Right.
2-bedroom, 700 square foot. Like on a 22nd of an acre. I don't know how much for that was a tiny little piece of land or whatever. But we paid like $675 for that house. And I mean, that was 20 years ago and whatever, blah, blah, blah. But the idea that I said that's reasonable and was thinking about it for a second. And then I was like, fuck no. Wait, what? And then I was like, wait, no, that doesn't make any sense. That is not reasonable. That's crazy. That's 150% of my mortgage.
Yeah.
For my 4-bedroom, 2,200 something square foot house. With my sweet studio in it and all the other crap I got going on in this house on a much bigger piece of land and this, that, and the other. But it's like, and in the county and that's part of it too, is he has the property tax of city and county where I only have county. So that's part of what that $1,500 comes from. But the idea that tiny piece of shit house built in like the 70s, is a $1,500 a month rental place. And that didn't sound crazy to me. It's crazy. Like, that is crazy. Those two statements back to back is crazy. The fact that it didn't sound crazy, that seems kind of reasonable for the way the market is right now, is fucking crazy. Because you got to think, like, the math is you got to make 5 times that. So you're making 75. That's $100,000 a year. You're making $100,000 a year,
right,
to rent a 900 square foot 3-bedroom 1-bath house that you're not allowed to have more than 2 adults in. Making $100,000 a year. That's fucking crazy. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm really freaking out. Like, the more I think about it, the more it's like, that's just nuts. How is anybody supposed to afford a house? Like, I got lucky as shit. Lucky. It's not me. I'm not super smart. I got lucky. I was in the right place at the right time, found this house. Market was in the shitter. Financing was easy for me. I happened to be in a good place financially. Not really, but at least on paper, I was in a good place financially to make this house happen. And that's it. I was just fucking lucky. Like, if we'd have been a year later, I would be renting to this day, probably. It's crazy.
Yeah.
All right, so basketball lines painted too far away. That's it. Come on, give me something. Look it up real quick. Give me something. I gotta have news of the weird to get done with. I can't do a show with it without. Gotta have something about some guy in Florida or some shit.
Got North Carolina's top elevator official says he'll no longer include his portrait in every lift.
Who said lift? Did he say lift?
The title says lift.
But is it a quote?
No.
I'm trying to think of who said lift, because that is not the way Americans. That's not what Americans call elevators.
Let's see here.
Is this like DeSantis lift? Anyway, that's a bad joke.
But Ellie said, "Oh, let's see him running him."
I mean, Joe Biden is the first president since Truman to win, being the shorter candidate.
Really?
Something like that. There's some crazy fucking stats that go along with like why it makes sense that you would go through the crazy process of putting heels in your boots so you look taller than you actually are.
There is some science behind it. Yeah.
Maybe that's the news of the weird. The whether or not DeSantis is wearing lifts, it doesn't matter. He's a fucking loser at this point anyway. He's not going anywhere. He hasn't suspended his campaign officially. Pence did.
Right.
But he's not officially quit yet, but he's fucking done.
There's a number still trying to hold on. You got Asa Hutchinson and Christie.
Nikki Haley's still around.
Yeah. Well, Nikki Haley and DeSantis are pretty much like tied for second.
Right. And next to nothing.
Yeah.
I had to explain to the wife that, yes, it is actually an option that we'll have a imprisoned president. I mean, RFK's got a real shot at least being a Nader. Can you imagine? Like a 40, 35, 25% election. I could see it with this, with not that Kennedy is my favorite independent ever to exist, but I could see it. Like, I mean,
Anything's possible.
I could see him getting 20+%.
They'd fire up enough people that have never voted.
I mean, but Trump's on the ballot, and that's how you get people to vote.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, well, I don't want to vote for Biden. And here's a Kennedy, and I don't know shit about shit, but Kennedy's a Democrat, right? He's not a Republican, at least. I don't know. You know, I'm like, this is lining up to be a real fun, crazy election cycle. And fun, crazy in the sense that it's fun because it's crazy, not because it's fun because it's good for anybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, Kennedy was in town last weekend, 2 weekends ago.
Right.
I wish I would have figured out how to make a. I would have probably had to make a donation, and I don't want to make donations on the record. I don't want any of that shit coming up if I ever decide to run for something.
Exactly.
I guess if I donated to an independent, so I guess that doesn't really matter from my standpoint.
Yeah. Depends on what you're running for.
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess actually realistically, it's the worst of both worlds, because if I tried to run as a Democrat for something, they said you voted for or you donated to somebody who isn't a Democrat. It's not that you gave money to our opponents. You gave money to somebody that isn't us.
You're a Dino and a Rhino.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if I was to run under either title, I would be. Yes, I would be exactly that. I would actually be that. I wouldn't be this new version of Rhino, but I would be a real Rhino, because I ain't a fucking Republican. I ain't a Democrat either. But I would run for something. I'm not running for shit. Fuck that. I've been trying to think of the scenario. Like the only way it makes sense to me to run would be the fun of running, and the fun of making it like part of the podcast, not for any actual real.
Like, oh shit, I won. Like, fuck, no, that wasn't supposed to happen.
Right. I mean, and like my first 2 weeks on the job will be just sitting with legal, being like, what can I talk about on the podcast legally? I can't talk to any of my cohorts. But other than that, what can I do on the podcast that isn't technically a ethics violation?
Right.
Because that's all that I'm going to be trying to figure out how to do. Because that's all I want to do. That's the only reason I want to run for office, is just to have some more shit to talk about. Yeah. So anyway, last call, Fred. You got anything? Nothing? Little something?
Got nothing else of importance.
Something. How's hockey going? We got a hockey game coming up here in a couple weeks.
Yeah, but trying to think about it too much.
This month? What do you mean not trying to think about it? I'm excited.
Trying to let it kind of like sneak up so I don't get like... They played today. It was a crazy afternoon game in Edmonton.
Yeah. ESPN doesn't quite understand me, apparently, on the app, because they know I like hockey. They know I like college football. But like at 2:30 on a Saturday afternoon, I'm not looking at hockey scores. But they put them first on my little breakdown.
Yeah.
It's like, I appreciate that. And I guess it's fair because I have two favorites in hockey because I follow the Predators, I follow the Penguins, where I only have one favorite in college football of UT. And so maybe they're thinking, since I have two favorites, I like that sport better.
Possible.
But either way, they're wrong. It's more of the story.
Jerry, I guess there was a former player that was playing in England, got a skate cut, ended up dying from it. So I guess there's now been a kind of another re-talk of trying to maybe change the rules and suggesting, but I was reading some story.
Yeah, I did hear something about, they were talking about like the neck guard was...
Yeah.
they might do the neck guard like the visor rule where rookies coming in next year.
Apparently, like England, like already changed theirs like immediately.
Yeah,
they're like, all right, we're changing this shit.
I mean,
but they were saying like even in hockey, like it's been notorious sport for like they grandfathered in the helmets that took like 10, 15 years to finally work their way.
Because they had because I kind of like the way they do their rule. I think it's reasonable.
Yeah.
It was starting this year. If you come into the league, you have to wear a helmet.
Yeah. But apparently, like even that, like they'd been talking about it for like 10 or 15 years before they even were like, okay, now if you want to.
Right. But then they did that. I mean, that's what they did like, 5 years ago with the visor.
Right.
So like 5 years ago, if you were a rookie, you had to have a visor. But if you were in your second season, it was an option.
Yeah. Which I think even now, like there's only like.
There's not many.
There's less than 10.
Yeah.
It's like 5 or 6.
I mean, that'd be a curious conversation. The longevity of athletes per sport.
Yeah,
because I think of hockey as being like pretty long term. Because
there's a couple 40-year-olds, but
right,
that's rare.
Because I mean, you had Yager, who's probably 70 now, and I think he's still playing in the Czech Republic or whatever.
Yeah, because he owns a team.
But like you got like like for me, like I got Crosby, who's like he's been in the league for 20 fucking years now.
Yeah.
He's getting up there, but he's not Sid the Kid anymore, but he's still Sid the Kid. But you've got these players like Ovechkin and stuff like that have been around forever. But it's like how many people come in and out in the same prop? Like how many, not just on the team, but how many people's entire careers come and go in the time that a handful of guys have these 20-year careers.
All right.
And I think that there's a generality in all sports in that. Like you have players that have long careers, and you have a ton of players that don't. But I'd be curious to actually see what the average is across sports. Like what sport has the longest average professional career? Football is probably the shortest by far. Maybe baseball, depending on. Well, I don't know. If you count minors as pro, then maybe not. But I think football is probably realistically, because you have guys that are in and around and playing and not playing and all that kind of shit that have like 1-year careers. And you have hundreds of those. And then you have like a dozen guys that have 10+ year careers.
Yeah.
And so the average is like 2.5 years. I'd say hockey's pretty simple. I'd say hockey's pretty short too.
Even then you kind of get into what do you classify as professional and then semi-professional, especially in hockey.
Right. Or
like,
baseball.
All right, you're not in the big show anymore, but
right. Hockey and baseball are probably very complicated in those aspects because of how the minor leagues works.
Yeah.
Basketball doesn't really have a minor league.
Because that's where a lot of those guys that can't stay up in the NHL.
Right.
They're playing the minors because they were still a big name. They're like, hey, they played in the NHL for a while, so they're bringing in a crowd in whatever city they're in.
Or they're good enough to be legitimately on an AHL team.
Right.
But not good enough to play for the Rangers.
Right.
And so, yeah, that would be an interesting set of like data points to figure out. It'd be fun. I think it'd be fun to see. My guess, in the major 4 whatever the major U.S. sports, I would say hockey. I'd say baseball. I'd say football is the shortest, and I'd say I'm gonna say basketball. No, I'm torn between basketball and baseball. If we're counting if you're a paid professional and that's what you do for a career.
Soccer, I would say like 31, 32, you're getting old.
Right.
Which isn't too different than baseball and hockey as well.
Yeah. I mean, like if a football player, like a running back in football, if you're 20, I think 27 is the number where it's like you might still be good and productive, but nobody's paying top dollar for you anymore. But then you got guys like, Brady, who played for fuck ever, and like a lot of these offensive linemen stick around for a long time.
Yeah.
But I still think you have. I think it's it's a small league, and there's so many people that are good enough to play that teams hire and fire all the time, and you have guys that have really short careers because of that, and that brings the average down. But I'm gonna go with longest. I'm gonna go with longest being baseball, just because of the way the minor league system works. That'd be my guess. So, anyway, on that, if you know the answer to that, send us an email. All right, that's the show, everybody. Whew. I'm exhausted. Fun, great day. Happy birthday to me. We did a podcast. We talked about stuff. If you know the right answer to the longest and shortest professional sports careers, please shoot us an email at almostanagreement@gmail.com and tell me all about it. And show your work, because I don't believe you just because you tell me so. I need some stats to back it up. Almostanagreement@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter. You can go to YouTube. Go to the website, almostanagreement.com. Check out all the cool stuff we've got on there. Go to your favorite podcast provider. Like, share, friend, follow, 5-star review, whatever it is that is the most positive possible thing you can do on the platform that you're on, because that helps more people find us faster. We're going to keep doing what we're doing. The 24 ballots or petitions are rolling in. It's a huge list. And so we'll start fucking around with that here in the next couple weeks as well. Check out the Compass Points podcast that I produce for CompassKnox.com. They do some great work as far as being way smarter and way more, we'll just say smarter. That works about doing stuff. So that was the show, everybody. Have a great night. We'll see you soon.